92%, Mr. Speaker. Gang-related homicides are up 92% since 2015. Let that sink in. 124,000. 124,000 more violent crimes this past year than in 2015. When will this Liberal government learn their hug-a-thug approach to crime in this country is literally costing Canadians their lives? But if you listen to them, everything's fine. Will they abandon this soft-on-crime approach?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And the timing of that question couldn't be better, because this afternoon we are starting clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-22, which will be transformational legislation when it comes to gun control in this country, Mr. Speaker. But that's not all we're doing, Mr. Speaker. We're also ensuring that communities have the resources that they need to support young people from starting involvement with gangs. We've put $1 billion into the border to make sure that we are bolstering our border to prevent guns from being struggled. We know that we need a multifaceted approach, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Mayor of Laval has told me that most of the crimes committed in his city are linked to illegal firearms and to organized crime. He says that we need better control at the borders to stop the smuggling of illegal weapons. And in the Prime Minister's imaginary world, the solution is to eliminate weapons that are used by hunters and to give criminals lighter crimes. When will he start prioritizing the safety of Canadians instead of prioritizing criminals? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in the history of Canada, we have eliminated a number of mandatory minimums. Mr. Speaker, that means that we are turning the page after the failure of the Conservative Party and their tough-on-crime policies. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague has said, we are going to move forward with the clause-by-clause study today for Bill C-21, which will fight firearms and handguns and assault weapons in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and we need to devote resources in that direction to continue to fight organized crime in Canada. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Well, it's quite the opposite, Mr. Speaker. The failure is from the Liberals. StatsCan has just published results that indicate that murders have been up over the last 3 years. 40% of homicide victims are attributed to the use of weapons and street gangs, and street gangs have free rein because they know that the Liberal government is taking away mandatory minimum sentences. They know that they have free rein to do what they want. When is the Prime Minister going to get serious and stop misleading Canadians and make sure that Canada's streets are safe? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the misleading statements come from the other side of the House. After years of Conservative government where there were cuts to border services, cuts to police services, and that cuts to their means to fight smuggling and gangs, we have to undo what the Conservatives have done. We are investing in our borders. We're investing in anti-gang programs. We're increasing maximum crimes for gun smuggling, Mr. Speaker, and that's the right direction. We are going to make Canada safer. The Honourable.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today, Statistics Canada reported that the homicide rate in Canada is the highest it's been since 2005, the last year that the Liberals were in government, in their previous government. In fact, 32% violent crime has risen since these Liberals last took government. But now they want to make it worse. They're letting violent criminals back onto the street after committing serious drug, gang, and gun crime. Will the minister listen to communities, to the police, to victims, and abandon his plan to let violent criminals back onto the streets?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-5 received historic royal assent last Thursday, and for the first time, Mr. Speaker, we have given back to judges the power to make the punishment fit the crime and allowing all of the judicial system to focus more closely on the serious crimes that the honourable member is referring to. Mr. Speaker, this is a crucial step past the failed Conservative policies that have only led to the over-incarceration of Black and Indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system. Mr. Speaker, we're moving forward in the right direction for a more just Canada.
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, that's just factually incorrect. The mandatory minimum penalties this government's eliminating were mandatory minimums put in place by the Prime Minister's father. So when he speaks under this government, the maximum sentences are increasing, maximum sentences of 10 years or more. Do you know how often that's been given out? 0% of the time. So when this minister talks about increasing maximum penalties, what he's really saying is we're not going to do anything about violent crime. Will the minister please abandon his soft on crime approach and take gun crime seriously in this country?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I would invite the honourable member to read Bill C-21, which is our attack on gun crime, Mr. Speaker, in which we increase the maximum penalties for very serious gun offences. Mr. Speaker, another important part of Bill C-5 was the reintroduction of the possibility of conditional sentence orders, which allows, again, Mr. Speaker, our judges, based on the person in front of them, to actually fashion a punishment that fits the crime and, again, concentrate our valuable judicial resources on serious crimes. It's a direction that even Justice Michael Moldaver has exhorted us to do, because that's what the system.
The Honourable Member, l'Honorable.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. When you listen to the Liberals, they seem to live in a world where everything is fine and nothing is wrong. But let me bring them back to reality. After 7 years under this Liberal government, the violent crime rate in Canada has increased by 32%. Yes, 32%. And what's the response to that? The adoption of Bill C-5, which abolishes minimum sentences for legal importation of firearms. You really have to be out of the loop. When will they put violent criminals and protect honest Canadians and do their job? Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we're doing. For the first time in the history of our country, Mr. Speaker, we are going to repeal minimum sentences and give the judges the flexibility to make the punishment fit the crime. Mr. Speaker, we had to get rid of the failed Conservative policy that did nothing but lead to the over-incarceration of Blacks and Indigenous peoples in our system. With Bill C-5, Mr. Speaker, which received royal assent last Thursday, we are going towards a fairer and more equitable country.